In this video, I will be taking you to the latter half of the 10th century and the beginning of the 11th century. We will be exploring a new land known as Vinland, but today we know this as North America. This was a time full of bloodshed and death, but also opportunity, as the world was full of mystery, with the maps of men being filled with endless oceans, and no one knew what lied beyond. Freydis Eiríksdóttir was the sister of Leif Erikson, a famous Norse explorer, but her character was far from your normal, typical Icelandic woman. This is her story. Freydis was the daughter of Erik the Red, who was an explorer, just like her brother Leif. In medieval Icelandic sagas, he is described as having founded the first settlement in Greenland. Erik was a hot-headed man who got into an argument with his neighbours due to them killing his slaves. He would kill them in revenge, but this revenge wasn't warranted, as in the eyes of the Vikings, the life of a slave wasn't the same as the life of a free man, so Erik would find himself in exile. However, his banishment would lead him to discovering Greenland and set up settlements there. Freydis was very similar to her father in terms of character. She was bold, rash, and violent. There is little to no information on her childhood, but we can assume it was turbulent at times due to the life of her father Erik, who would find himself in deadly situations, but who also would later command great respect. Freydis first appears in the Saga of the Greenlanders. It is said that Freydis proposed a voyage with the two brothers Helgi and Finnbogi to travel to Vinland together and share the profits of whatever they find and bring back 50-50. The two brothers would agree to this proposal, and Freydis would turn to her brother Leif for permission to stay in one of his houses he had built in Vinland, to which Leif said she could stay in them during her time in Vinland. Freydis had an agreement with Helgi and Finnbogi that they could take no more than 30 men each, so that they all had the same chance to acquire their wealth in this new land. Freydis decided to bring 5 extra men though, betraying the trust of the brothers straight away. This would foreshadow what would later happen. The voyage to Vinland was successful, but the brothers arrived just before Freydis and decided to unload their belongings into Leif's house. When Freydis arrived and saw what the brothers were doing, she made them immediately remove their things. This caused the brothers to build their own longhouse. These petty disputes would last all winter. One day, Freydis arose one morning to speak with the brothers. Finnbogi was the only one awake to hear what Freydis had to say, and he explained that he was tired of all the ill feelings they had towards each other and wanted to clear the air. She agreed and offered a trade. The brothers were to stay in Vinland, and Freydis would go back home with their ship, as their ship was much larger and would be better to bring back her people and her half of the profits. Finnbogi would agree to this, and the two then parted ways. Once Freydis returned home, she awoke her husband, Thorvard. He asked his wife where she had been, and she told him a very different tale to what had actually happened. She told her husband that she offered to buy the brothers' ship, but then they became angry and struck her. Freydis then told him if he didn't avenge this disrespect, that she would divorce him. Freydis' husband Thorvard then led his men to the brothers' camp and would sneak into their houses while the brothers were sleeping. In an organized attack, they went into each house and tied up all the men. Freydis requested that the brothers Helgi and Finnbogi be killed, and they were executed. She wanted all of the men dead though, and if they belonged to the brothers' crew, they too were executed. Soon enough, only 5 women were left alive, but no man dare kill them. She ordered her men to kill the women, but they would not. In response, Freydis said, "Hand me an axe." She then slew every woman left alive herself. It is said that she was very pleased with how well her mourning had gone. She told everyone involved that whoever spoke a word about the events that just happened would be killed. She then came up with a story that the brothers had chose to stay in Vinland while she returned to Greenland. Once she arrived in Greenland, she made sure her crew were well rewarded in order to keep them quiet and loyal about her evil deeds. Eventually, her famed brother Leif found out what happened in Vinland, and he was infuriated. He had 3 men from the expedition tortured until they divulged the truth. He couldn't bring himself to actually punish or harm his sister, but he predicted that her descendants will not get on well in this world. He was insinuating that her heinous acts had cursed her whole bloodline. Freydis also appears in the Saga of Erik the Red, where she is just as savage as in the Saga of the Greenlanders. It is said that during an expedition to Vinland, led by Karlsefni, his group discovered a place they would call the Hop. It was a tidal river, where a river flows through a lake to the sea. The surrounding country was rich in wildlife, and it was a place of magnificent beauty. There were fish as big as a man's leg, wheat and grapes that would grow in plenty, and it even didn't snow in the winter. On the expedition, Karlsefni's group would encounter the Native Americans that the Vikings called Skraelings, who used boats covered in animal skins. The Vikings would display a white shield as a sign of peace. The Skraelings would return, however, in greater numbers, and the Vikings would trade red cloth for animal pelts with them. The Vikings would refuse to trade their swords and spears, as these items were precious to them. The Skraelings would eventually become scared due to a bull that went loose in the Viking camp. 3 weeks later, the Skraelings returned with even more numbers than before and began howling. A battle between the Vikings and Skraelings would soon ensue, but the Skraelings used a ballista-like weapon to hurl large heavy rocks over the heads of the Vikings, causing them to retreat. Freydis, having heard the commotion from inside of her hut, would emerge heavily pregnant. She then ran after her fellow Viking warriors, called them cowards and said, "Why run away from such worthless creatures, stout men that ye are, when, as it seems to me likely, you might slaughter them like so many cattle? Let me but have a weapon. I know I could fight better than any of you." Soon enough, the Skraelings surrounded her. She saw a corpse on the floor and pulled a sword from the dead man's hand. She then undid her garment and slapped the sword upon her breast. This frightened the Skraelings, and they would then abandon their attack. The survivors of the slaughter would praise Freydis for her courage. And so comes the end of the tale of Freydis. In both sagas, she is described as a masculine, strong, and perhaps deranged woman. The way she manipulated her husband into causing a massacre for no reason was very cruel indeed, and the way she was willing to fight and die whilst being heavily pregnant against the Skraelings was brave, but the way she went about it, in my opinion, could also be confused for madness. She was a unique woman, unlike many others, but one thing is certain: she was extremely strong-willed and was no doubt a fighter. Her deeds were written into the sagas of old, but was she a brave shield maiden whose positive deeds have been lost to history, with only her cruel, insane actions being left behind? Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all soon for another history profile.